Hi human beings and animals, Baya Pastrana here from Bike Park Central. Today we're going to go over the materials and mechanisms for the upper bike shifter. Let's sit down and begin. So before we start going over the specific mechanisms and parts of the shifter, it's important to show what it actually does. So let me just make some space here. Okay, we're good. Let me bring my bike. So assistant, come closer. If you press the large shift lever up here, it increases the tension in the cable running through here, moving this derailleur in the back closer to the larger gear, increasing the gear ratio. Okay, so that's the large gear shifter increasing up. Then come up here and look. When you press the smaller gear shifter right here, it decreases the tension running through the cable, moving the derailleur more to the left, causing it to go down in gears, increasing the speed of the tire if you want to pedal harder. Okay, so that was a short demonstration of what the shifter actually does with increasing and decreasing the gear ratio for making pedaling harder and easier. Let me just move the desk back into the right spot. Okay, ready to go into more specific and interesting mechanisms of the shifter. Okay. So now that we got the demonstration over, let's get a closer view on what the shifter actually looks like and the parts. So to start off, we're going to start with the clamp mechanism that clamps the shifter to the handlebars. As you can see here, it's an open circle with a slit and a bolt that allows it to tie into the bars. We're able to test that this material is an aluminum and it's anodized black. We were able to test this because put a magnet to it, it's not magnetic. Plus when you scrape a key across it, as you can see here, it easily leaves a gouge in the material, which means that it has to be aluminum. So next for the bolt, we could test that, as taken out is easier to demonstrate. It is slightly magnetic, seen from it being able to move with the magnet, but when you bring a key to it, it has absolutely no scratching at all, very hard steel, which means that it has to be a stainless steel, but it has to be duplex stainless steel because it has not only iron but also other materials that create it non-magnetic but slightly magnetic. And the reason for this is so that it doesn't rust, stainless steel. But they also probably didn't want to increase the cost, so they added other materials to make it a little bit cheaper. Okay, so now I'm gonna take off these 4 screws right here, and I'm gonna show you the rest of the metal body. Just hold on a second. Okay. So now that we have the metal body separated from the rest of the shifter, let's first, before we go into this, let's first just check the screws. As you can see, they are also slightly magnetic, being able to lift it a little bit. And they also don't scratch, which means they're the same material as this. Another interesting thing is if you look at the threads, they are widely spread out and very tall compared to the very small and tightly packed threads. The reason for this is because these threads are screwing into another metal, and these threads are screwing straight into plastic, which just make it cheaper so they don't have to put inserts into the plastic, and makes it easier for assembly and just lower cost. So now let's go into the metal body. As you can see, all the intricate parts and all the different shapes on here, it had to be low pressure die cast molded, where they have a pot underneath and they shoot the material up into a die to make it, because there's no other way for them to get all these little crevices and everything made out of metal. The body is one piece with the clamp, so it is also made out of anodized aluminum, non-magnetic, and can scratch easy. We go over the process of the anodized aluminum, the low pressure cast molding, and all that in a presentation that we linked lower in the video because they're more complicated and would take too long to explain. So the next part we go into is the shift indicator, which is kind of interesting how they did this. So as you can see down here, they made little gears out of paper, and these paper go through up here and have an indicator painted red on here that indicates what gear it is on this plastic strip. And when you press a shift, this little plastic gear in here engages with the paper and moves it up and down to indicate what gear you are in. Alright, so instead of talking about the plastic body itself, we're gonna skip that till later in the video because it's to see like how exactly it's made and its components. You have to take all this mechanism out. So we'll first start with the mechanism itself. So the first material here is a spring, which is what allows the wire to retract back into there, and it makes it easier for it to shift down. So as you can see, when it shifts up, here's a shifting when you press the larger one. When you press it, when you do that, the spring compresses, and then when the spring force is what forces this plastic wheel to return when you press this down, and that you can see that just returning, going up, and then going down. Okay, so let's just take the spring off so we can look at the mechanism underneath. As you can see here, it's special inserts are made in the plastic for the materials, so additional parts aren't made, just made into the body itself, reducing cost and making it easier. The only problem with this is sometimes if these parts dull and don't work, start slipping, it's hard to put the shifter back together if you take it apart. So in the future, it might be better to add either some like metal insert right here into the plastic so that it doesn't start stripping and makes it easier for reassembly. So let's just take the spring off here. That was good enough. So the next part is this bolt right here. So as you can see from this bolt, it is steel, and it comes down here. It's what holds the whole shifter together, and it has to be steel because it's magnetic, and they use steel just because it's cheap inside the body, and they just painted it to keep it from rusting. Okay, let me just take that out and I'll go to the parts underneath. Okay, so before I take this bolt off and take it apart too much so you can't really see the mechanism, let's take a closer look first. So as you can see, when you press the larger shifter, the thing engages and it pushes this thing over, and it locks it into this little teeth right here. And when you let go, it engages with the teeth. So when you press it here, this metal piece slides up, falls into place, and then locks. Slides up, falls in place, locks on that side. So that's how it shifts up. When it shifts down, it's a little more complicated. So when you press this thing engages on this metal part right here, which pushes that over, and this slides back. But so that it only slides back one, they added teeth on this side. So this side engages with this tooth right here, and this tooth is open. So it falls into there, and there it engages, so it locks. So then when you want to shift down again, you push it, engages here, allows it to go over here and there. So it does it like one by one. And the reason for this is because, say you press for here, they could do it like that because you could shift up a bunch. But the reason why they only added one here is because if you press this and it has the spring here tensioning it, if you press it here, it would just go through all the gears and go straight to one. You couldn't like select the gear you want. That's why they have to have this second gears on this other side to lock it, so it can only shift one, which is a disadvantage because this one you could shift up to the right gear faster, but but this one you have to go one by one to each gear. So like a solution to this would be with like new electronic gears. You could just press the button really quick or program it to what gears you like a lot, and it shifts those gears automatically instead of having to press it one by one like this. Okay, so now that we have the screw and tie-in, just have a quick look. You can see up here, because this plastic piece is rotating on here, they smooth it out so that it could slide easily on there, but then they added threads underneath to thread into the metal below it. And if you look even closer, they added blue Loctite on it to help keep it locked together when this thing is rotating so much, doesn't loosen, which is a problem with parts that rotate a lot. So that's just a part that they added to help the consumer not break as much, and had very little cost change on the product. So the next part we're going to talk about is this plastic piece that the wire connects to that tensions it. As you can see here, there's a little hole, so the wire comes through here with a little head, and when it wants to shift up, it turns this way and tensions the wire that goes down to the lower derailleur. And when the wire tensions, it shifts up, and then once you shift down, it goes this way and it decreases the tension shifting down. Okay, so now let's look into more of the plastic piece. So as you can see from all these holes here, all these little pieces, and how intricate this piece is, this piece had to be made with injection molding, which means they just inject plastic into a mold, fills all the crevices, and then they just take out the piece and it's perfectly made without having to cut anything off or sand it or anything like that, which increases the production and reduce the cost for producing it. As you can see, they also added a little bit of kind of weight saving, I guess you could say, or just cost saving. Took off some plastic so they don't have to use as much, only uses exactly what was needed. And to go into the actual gear itself now, so that they could reduce the cost, they made this out of plastic because it doesn't really need to be metal. It just pulls the wire and it engages with this paper thing here. So it doesn't need to be made out of metal because it doesn't need as much force. But so they could add a metal gear, because this needs to be metal so that it doesn't break like plastic would. It added these 3 slots right here with the hole, and with that it locks into place in the plastic so that they could reduce the cost while still adding a metal gear. To explain the gear a little bit more, it is obviously made out of steel to reduce the cost, because with all these parts in here, the steel would just be the cheapest to make it, and like the cheapest while still having enough strength to make it work. But because it's constantly sliding on the other metal pieces, they put a tin plating on the piece, which is common in a lot of key mechanisms and like inserts and bolts. You always see it on there so that it slides easier in and out. And the only problem with this is, if you could look closely, you could see the steel underneath the tin, which means the tin plating is starting to wear out, which means over time it's gonna not slide as easily on here and start to lock up. And a solution to this would be to add either some grease. I feel like if you just added grease to here and didn't add the plating, maybe the cost would be a little bit higher, and you'd have to like keep adding grease like every few years, which is an inconvenience, but the piece would last longer, wouldn't wear out as much, and it would just be smoother. Okay. To go into the next assembly, I'll just leave that there. That's the bottom here. So here's the second part of the gearing. So here is the part that shifts down. So as you can see here, when you press this plastic piece, it engages with this metal tab right here that they simply just bended from a metal sheet. They simply just had the metal sheet on there and they bent this up so that they had a cheaper production cost, and it's just the most efficient way of making it. So when you press this, it slides here, and this spring right here pushes this thing back when you press it right here, and these special holes are made for the spring to engage, just that it's made into the piece itself so you don't have to add extra parts. And for the thing to slide, instead of using screws, they just used rivets. You see they put the rivet in here and they rivet it. And the point of the riveting was just because you don't need a bolt if it's never going to be taken apart. This part's so cheap, you just replace this instead of adding a bolt. And this part is just easy to insert, cheaper production. All those reasons just make sense to put this in here instead of a bolt. And as you can see here, they also added here a little spring right here, so that even this little shifter has more force pushing it backwards, which they didn't have to add because they had this spring here already pushing back. But it's just a little feature they added to make it even more responsive, which is nice. And for the plastic itself, you can also see the holes. It's obviously also injection molded with the intricate pieces and the spacing here to make it look a little bit cooler, pretty much the main reason. And to attach the shift down lever to this piece, they just used a little shaft, and they made holes and they bent the steel here, added the shaft into it. As you can see, I could just push it, which means that they just put the shaft, put it in here, and then in the plastic piece itself, they added little stops here and there. Got a little stops down there and on the top piece, so that this thing can't move. So that also decreased production costs, because all they have to do is put it down there. They don't have to tighten any bolts. All they have to make this, and they can make it into the body itself, which just makes it easier and decrease production. And for here, you can see additional holes. The purpose of these holes is just because the metal is not needed. Like, what's the point of having this all metal if it doesn't have any additional strength and it's just wasted? But the reason for this one is because this piece right here, as you can see on the inside, it has these additional gears. So those gears go inside there, which allow this little tiny piece right here to engage the larger shift lever with the smaller shift lever. So that's how it shifts up. This little piece engages with these little teeth on the inside of this hole to shift up in gears. So let me just take this out so you can have a closer look. This is just the spring for the large shifter. As it tensions, you press it, tensions even harder, and then it comes back with this force of the spring. So the spring is needed to have a quick spring back, because no one likes when their shifters are mushy. So it needs that to shift backwards, and it makes sure that it's constantly engaged, because if it went up there, if the spring didn't fully push it back, it was not engaged all the way, then it wouldn't shift back far enough. As you see here, it's kind of interesting. They added a little slot in there, and instead of putting in there, you just slide this into the slot. So it's like even easier to add the spring on there, decrease production costs, all those reasons. So before I go into this piece here, first let's talk about how this engages with this upper gear. So as you can see, in here there's little tiny teeth. Not as large as these outside ones, but they're super tiny. And when you want to shift up, it engages with these teeth. And then when you want to shift down, it slides over these teeth. Because there's a spring in there, it slides right over them. But down here, it engages. See how it slides? and then engages if you want to shift up. So here it shifts, turns this gear on this piece. You want to shift down, it just slides right over them. And the reason for this is so that mainly it's just the best way they figured out of engaging this piece while it's below this gear, and having it kind of have that ratcheting mechanism so that it could ratchet, go up 3, and then go back, and then go up in another 3. Because if this mechanism wasn't here, so that your shifter was here, you'd press it, go up a gear, and it continue to go like that. It would never return back to what the gear you want. So that's the reason why they added this little mechanism instead of just attaching it straight to here. So this piece here, the larger shifter, is also just injection molded. As you can see, it's obviously just same parts as this. It kind of the shape of it, the way that you have these little holes where it injects the material into the mold, it's injection molded. But when you see here, they added this little piece because it's sliding on here, so it has a coating, slides better. Needs a strength in here to engage with this, because when you really push on it, you don't want anything plastic to break. So it adds the metal, but then this whole thing is not metal and super expensive. They just add this insert here like they did with this top gearing. So if you take this out, you can see how it works. That piece is just what holds in this thing, this little piece in here. And this little piece just has a spring that's inserted into the plastic. And when you're shifting up and gauges here, shifts up, want to go down, it presses this in and it goes click, click, click. Like that. And that's how this little piece in here works. And for really the final part of it, we have the lower bolt that screws into this part here. As you can see, as you can see, they're both made of steel, and they both had the paint on it. But the problem with the paint also, as you can see in here, the paint is worn out. So if water or dirt or any kind of corrosive material starts coming in here and it starts turning this all rusty, and then this piece won't slide as good on here anymore. It'll start like locking the thing up. That's the only issue with them using steel and only painting it, because eventually it's gonna wear out and eventually it's gonna rust. You can see why the blue Loctite thread's going there. The purpose of Loctite is constantly turning like that when you shift up and down. So eventually you like loosen up and come out, but the Loctite locks it in there so it won't move, won't loosen. And really the last part of it, we have the plastic body of the shifter. So as you can see from the plastic body, they really did a lot to use the least amount of plastic as possible. You can see for here, these little parts right here, these are where the screws are used to bolt in the metal part to the plastic. But as you can see, they didn't want to add all plastic in here to give enough room for it to thread in. So all they did is they increased the amount of plastic for this one little part right here. As you can see, it's straight, and they added more plastic right here just so that this little screw could thread in. As you see, the purpose of the thicker threads, because it's screwing straight into plastic, there's no metal inserts in there. And for the plastic itself, you can see all these little pieces right here, all these little tabs and everything are all to hold in the other metal pieces, and to add little pieces like up here is a piece where a spring the upper spring I showed you before engages. Down here is where this lower spring that engages this shifter sits right in here and up against there, so that when it shifts it's locked in with this little tab and locked in up here. So they add all these little parts for all the other springs, and the rest is just structure for the metal to really lock it in place. And they just use injection molding here. As you can see, they have the additional little holes and inserts where they injected the plastic into the mold. and they decreased the amount of materials just by making all of these little pieces out of plastic right away instead of adding pieces later. They can make this piece faster. They can make sure everything is exactly the same. They can have less issues. Cost is reduced. So making out this plastic makes sense because there's not enough force to like add the spring and everything to really require a metal piece. The plastic will do fine enough. It's strong enough. And that is basically the whole thing. I'll put it back together and show you a little bit more just how it works when shifting up in the indicator. And then you could go into the other videos and into our presentation link below, and you can see more of how like they make the springs, why they make them out of, they simply make it of steel. It doesn't make any sense to use anything else. How they add this coating and how they inject the plastic, how they make all these screws, and why they use certain size screws, how they make all this smooth screws and all this other kind of intricate parts, and the methods they use to not only make it cheap but also make them strong. And so I'm just going to put it together and show you how it works, put it all back together. Before I put it totally back together, I just forgot about a few issues that I found with this shifter. So the ones I stated before, the part with the coating, it could have been better made with some grease. This issue I found with the part where you slide the cable in. You see there's a hole here, you slide the cable in there. It has this head right here that locks right here. So when you shift up, it pulls it like that, pulls the head with the cable, pulls it that way through this, and that goes all the way down to the lower derailleur. And then when you shift it down, it shifts back and this one goes back. The issue I had with this is it's probably hard to see, but right in there, yeah, you got it. The hole in there is very small. An issue with this is if you have any fraying at all in your cable, the cable won't go through the hole, which was the issue because I only have one cable with me currently, and I couldn't demonstrate it actually putting the wire because it always frayed, and I tried this with like 2 or 3 wires and it frayed every time. So sorry I couldn't get that through, but that's the issue with this. I've never tried taking this shifter apart, and I don't know how you do it. I looked up videos, couldn't figure it out. So I just showed from them. It goes through there and goes through this hole. Yeah, the issue is the hole is too small. They could have made it bigger because this head is huge, and so you could slide the cable through there. Not sure why they did that. The other issue is for this like here, it's just paper. And a couple of times I was shifting it and it just skipped over the gears. And there is the issue that I did take it apart and put it back together, and I couldn't put it back together like perfectly. But because it's made out of paper, these teeth just fold over and they don't work anymore. So they could have made it out of some type of like stiffer plastic or some other type of material, or like a very thin sheet metal, like, you know, the one they make it with rulers. If they made it out of this material, it would have worked way better. The plastic gears are fine because those are very rigid. They would never strip or anything. Just this kind of breaks. And yeah, those are really the only issues I have with this shifter. Everything else, the design's pretty good. Low cost, but pretty robust and strong. Everything should work for a long time. And yeah, let me just finally put it back together. Okay, so I put this whole shifter back together and show you how this indicator works with the shifters, because I didn't show them in the beginning. When you press this to go to a lower gear, you can see it goes 7, 5, 1. It's a little bit faded just because they painted that onto the plastic. With like ink, they just stamped it on there. They didn't like add it very good, so it's worn off over time. And you can see when you press it, it moves the paper with that plastic gear I showed you before. and it goes up to 1. And then once you press the shifter down, it goes that. As you can see, you could shift up multiple gears to get to the lower gear, but you can only go one at a time down to the other one. You can go anywhere you want in this, but you can only go down one at a time. And that's just the way the shifter was designed. They could have maybe added a different way, but that's just the cheapest and like most robust and simplest way, so that's why everyone uses that design. To make it a different way isn't like, you could do this, make it wider and make it shift like that, but it's just overcomplicated, and when you're riding your bike you don't want it to be too complicated. So this is just the best design. And yeah, basically that's how the shifter works. Okay, now that we're done, I'm gonna go for my daily bike ride. Have some fun out there. Gotta put on my safety gear. See you later in the next episode of Bike Parts Central. My name is Bobby Pastrami. See you later.